Now, I was very, not surprised, but I thought it was kind of amusing. I was surfing around the internet and I watched the 13-minute Obama campaign Keating 5 film, and you are virtually the star of it.
I actually haven't seen it.
Well, in your role,
YouTube is not my generation.
Oh well, I'll send you the link. You look good, you know. It's,
do I? Darker hair?
You probably would say that was a younger you, but you at the time were the special counsel for the Senate Ethics Committee,
Right.
investigating the whole what they became known as the Keating 5
Right.
scandal, and you appear. I think you appear 3 or 4 times over the course of the 13 minutes. And you're kind of back on a burner with that since the story got brought up again. You and John McCain, I assume, got to know each other then?
Well, I got to know him much better than he got to know me.
But that was when you two first met.
Because, yeah, I was investigating him, but I don't, that's correct.
And then after the Keating 5 was over, did you become friends?
No, I had no relationship with him at all.
And but then later he retained you in the matter. I guess we would just call it the matter of Vicky Eisenman.
That's correct.
Right.
That's the
Against the New
lobbying
York
story
Times,
with
right.
the New York Times.
When the New York Times reported that he was.
And I was quite surprised that he called me, actually, because I didn't have a relationship with him.
But wouldn't that have been smart of him as a presidential candidate, knowing that the Keating 5 might come up? Because presumably he's your client. You can't really talk about him.
Well, God, you're cynical.
I live in Washington.
No, I don't.
No.
I don't think hiring me had anything.
Really? But it's possible.
No, I don't think it's.
You're going to think about it when you leave here.
He hired me. No, he hired me in the New York Times because he knew that I had
handled the Keating 5.
No, I had handled Judy Miller's case.
Right. Okay.
And that I have handled a number of high-profile cases involving journalists.
Right.
And I think that's the main reason that he hired me.
Did that go anywhere?
But because my reason is he didn't shut me up on the Keating 5. My position on the Keating 5 has always been the same. Before he hired me, which is like, 15 years after, I'll talk about what's in the public record. And
in your book.
And I'm not a partisan, and I'm not a partisan, and
improper conduct, but not guilty.
Well, the committee found poor judgment, no improper conduct.
Poor judgment.
Yeah.
But you basically exonerated him.
I basically.
Would that be the word you would use?
I think that's a fair word. I exonerated him, and I exonerated John Glenn.
John Glenn.
Now let's be clear what we are talking about.
Yeah.
My job was to determine if he violated any standards of the Senate, whether he committed any ethical violations, whether there are any violations, I suppose, indirectly of law, and that's what he was exonerated on. Now, some people are misusing that term to say, and expanding it to go well beyond that. I wasn't addressing whether he was a good friend of Keating particularly. I wasn't addressing whether he was for or against regulation or any of that. It was very focused on whether there were violations, and I felt that he and John Glenn did not commit any violations.
I gathered from what you wrote in your book, that basically McCain was with the group and solidly with the group until he realized what was going on and then put the brakes on his own.
I think that's probably a pretty.
And John Glenn did too.
Yeah.
And but up until that moment when they put the brakes on, they were very much with the group.
I think that's probably
and interested in doing what they could for Keating because he'd been a friend to all of them.
And an important constituent in one way or another.
And McCain and his wife had, benefited from the luxuries that Charles
but
knew.
don't forget, there are lines. These things are, you got to use a surgeon's scalpel on these things and not a butcher's meat axe. It's clearly improper for certain kind of conduct, and other conduct's appropriate. I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking a regulator what's going on. You know, the law enforcement authority or the executive branch can be very abusive to people. Very
But
abusive.
don't the rules change all the time too?
The rules change all the time, and it's very appropriate. I mean, you have a constitutional right to seek the redress from a member. The question is, are you crossing lines? And where I drew a real, and I got virtually no help from Congress, none. I mean, they said, you know, were there any standards violated? I said, well, what standards? They said, you figure that out,
Yeah.
basically. And I mean,
Well, you said this case was the biggest challenge
Yeah.
of your career.
it was. So I was impressed with the fact that once Senator Glenn and once John McCain learned that the regulators had made a criminal referral of the matter,
Yeah.
that they backed off. And that was a very important fact for me, whereas the other senators did not back off. Because at that point, it was no longer asking your congressman, you know, what is the status of my case, or can't you get them to hurry up? At that point, it was something much more than that. And that's kind of where that was one of the real important lines that I drew.
How many years were you special counsel for the Ethics Committee?
Oh, I have done, well, you know, I still had my law practice, so
Right,
this
right,
is just
right.
like a
This was-
case.
right.
I did 3 investigations for them, 3 of the most public ones.
Right.
One was Senator
Harrison
Harrison Williams in
right.
80-81, and then a Senator Durenberger, and then the Keating 5. So the
Is that a
Keating-
relationship that formally ends if you're
Yeah,
a special counsel?
Yeah.
And did it end after the Keating Five? Did it
Yes.
end because of the Keating Five?
Well, it ended. I mean,
It ended.
they're free to ask me to do it some
Right.
other one again, but which I probably wouldn't do. But
Right.
but
And the ethics rules then and the ethics rules now, congressional ethics rules, how similar or dissimilar are they? Do you?
well, the problem with Congress is rules aren't of no value to you unless you're going to enforce them. And frankly, I think the whole ethical approach of
Yeah.
Congress, and this is both sides. You know, I have to be candid with you, or it was
Please do.
silly for me to even come here.
Absolutely.
I think both sides are it's absurd. They really don't have an interest in enforcing the ethical laws. If you get caught, or if you're out and out taking a bribe, that's different. But it's largely a joke.
Too many
eth-
sacred cows?
Too many sacred cows, and there is a collegiality there. I mean, they need each other for votes. They need each other to get their pet earmarks into bills, and so, you know, then
Earmarks is a new bad word, though. for
it
this
is a
campaign.
bad word. It is a bad word.
Is the John McCain that you see out on the campaign trail the John McCain you know? Do you think that everybody talks about how he's become this other John McCain? Do you?
I don't really have an honest opinion.
Well, but you talk
on that. It's so different. I mean, he's out there politically. I never got into any politics with him. You know, I examined him and cross-examined him, and
But when you see these people who you know one way, and then you see them out on the hustings having to, I don't know whether you want to say stoop or rise to levels that aren't usually considered the normal, acceptable behavior, say on the Senate floor. I just wonder, since you know the city so well, I just wonder what private thoughts
no,
go
I
through
don't
your-
have any. I don't really see him now and say, "Gee, he's a
He's
whole
lost
lot
it."
different than."
Right.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Especially when you talk about just the behavior of people in the Senate. It's interesting to see 2 senators running for the presidency against each other, where it's so much about being so nice to each other, and a presidential campaign transforms them into something